Hello everyone and welcome to a new video from Your Overwatch. I'm Eddie the Chump and today I've got FREEDO with me to talk about the new Symmetra buff in the PTR. Now FREEDO's played her a lot more than the rest of the guys on the team, so we're going to get his detailed and fun opinions about the whole changes. Say hello FREEDO.
How's it going everybody? Symmetra's changed, I'm hyped, I hope you are too.
Okay FREEDO, what's the first thing you'd like to talk about?
Well, the positives for sure is that she's a much more streamlined play experience, which I think anytime they're doing a change on a character, this is the goal they should have. Like, any character that feels clunky to play should get changed to a way that they're enjoyable to the user at the very least, before we even get into the really nerdy meta implications and things like that. So, with that being said, the fact that she feels like she can do something all the time, whether that's be in the death ball fighting out, push out a barrier, spam her alternate fire into the things from afar, and then when she gets in a chaotic fight, she can slam down a bunch of turrets, and because that she always has them from coming out of spawn, and that they regenerate faster, she'll always have them available, so you feel active in the fight, and that's a very good thing overall. I had a lot of fun playing her. She's enjoyable. I just don't know if she's there yet, unfortunately. The good news is she's definitely better than she was before.
Yeah, one of the discussions we were having yesterday while we were playing is that she was always good in solo queue against disorganized teams, even in her old state, but now you think that she's been buffed, you think she's even more effective in that sort of environment, especially on defense, although she can be used in like different scenarios now because of her, obviously her photon barrier and all that kind of stuff. We'll get into that a little bit later, but definitely like you're going to see a lot of Symmetra if this goes through in solo queue.
That's the crux of the matter, really, because the base of her kit is built in such a way that it is enabled to be countered, if that makes sense, whereas a lot of other characters just do something actively. Symmetra sets things up, so if she has sentries across the map, if the enemy team is properly taking care of them with like a Winston who kills them instantly, or if the enemy team have good map presence and good communication, setting up these ultimates, whether it be the teleporter or the shield generator, they more easily will take care of it. So it's almost based upon the enemy team's interactions more so than what you're capable of doing as a Symmetra. Now, the good news is they put more tools in your hands to be able to do that. Now, the question is where the rubber hits the road and you come up against friction with enemy teams challenging you, is there still value there? And that's what I think we'll discuss a bit here.
So one of the things that we were looking at when we looked at Symmetra is like instant value, and I have to say it's cool that she has 2 ultimates now, but in my personal opinion 75 shields is not enough. It's an ultimate. I think that's just my personal opinion. I think it should be more. I don't think it's necessarily the same potential value that the teleporter has on a first point defense or something like that. Obviously it's harder to leverage and the shield generator is much easier to guarantee value, but I don't know if it's enough for an ultimate in my personal opinion, especially when you compare it to other ults in the game.
Well, the good news is now that she has the option to use her ultimate in a variety of ways, that it can get that instant value, and that's sort of what I was talking about before, with she has to like set something up anyway, but in worst case scenarios, if she's in a panic, she could slam down her shield generator just off to the corner or something, and everyone on her team in a radius will get those 75 shields. Now, the issue is, those shields have different interactions with different heroes. Now, we had a dream scenario where we had a Torb and a Symmetra on our same team, and we had armor and these shields at one point, and like Winston had, what did you say, like 700 HP or something? Like,
yeah, it's crazy.
Right, that's insane. But realistically speaking, the difference between HP bars doesn't matter as much as you think. Like, the hitbox and the fight that they're in is more important, because Reaper doesn't really care if you have an extra 75 HP and you're Winston. If he's slamming you in the face, you're just dead, and that's not going to make a difference. Where it does make a big difference is on a character like Tracer, who is fine-tuned to have 150 HP, and a lot of the interactions she has with different duels in the game are purely based on that number. So for instance, McCree does 70 damage a shot, 140 at close range to the head, and he needs that flashbang damage to finish her off. The flashbang sets up the headshot, and then he can one-shot her. Whereas now, if you have an extra 75 HP, now Tracer has this regenerating health on top of the health she already can recall and get, and that's a much more enabling use of the shields, whereas on a big character who's already going to take a lot of stray bullets and stuff anyway, it's not as crucial. So, but the problem is, if you're running a Symmetra you almost have to be running a comp that fits with her. So having a Tracer on your team is a bit counterintuitive to the things that are required to set up Symmetra, and that's the awkward place she sits in the meta right now. She can't, like, freely fight on her own. She'll need tanks in front of her. She isn't mobile enough to be able to handle a fight, really, and her weapon isn't strong and reliable enough for her to win duels either. So it is a bit counterintuitive to have these flanker characters on your team to be able to maximize the value of her ultimate, which is something that we may have to explore through time and get the right balance with it to see if it works well or not. The big takeaway with this, though, is that Symmetra players now don't feel like their ultimate is just a massive waste, because a lot of the times, Teleporter is either going to come too late, or putting it down too early gives the enemy team an opportunity to go find it and destroy it. There's a lot of just really weird ways to get no value out of it, unfortunately, whereas the shield generator can just guarantee value and be used preemptively and less situationally.
Okay, so that's her ultimate dealt with. What do you think about the rest of her kit?
The elephant in the room is the projected barrier, but I think I'm going to handle that second. A big issue that I have with her right now is her sentries. Now, the good news is, like I said before, she can more freely put them down. She'll always have them in her back pocket, out of spawn, and when she's mid-fight, having to run away because she's Symmetra and she can't really fight, her weapon isn't really reliable enough for her to confidently take duels. Oftentimes, you want to run away around a corner, set up some sentries quickly to try to lay a trap for the enemy. The issue with that is, a lot of the time, those sentries will be out of the engagement because they're so easily countered, but they hold a percentage of her value as a character, so they can't, like, buff up other parts of her with the sentries existing. Compare it to Torb, who has a turret that can shoot at range, and you can definitely set it up to a spot where it will guarantee value, whereas the sentries are a little bit cheekier positioned, like you hide them in little pots and pans on awkward angles. It's hard to get consistent value out of them, and because of that, I think that's the one area that they should look into next. Other people have raised that maybe they should put up a passive healing aura, or maybe do something with ammo. An interesting one that I heard was maybe a small pulse that can maybe mark players through walls. That would be interesting. So there's sort of like little sentries, as in from Dota, where you can actually see part of the map. I think that would be amazing. Something like that to sort of extend the value of having those out, because you got to remember, there's a massive opportunity cost to have to go to the side of the map to put them in a good spot without dying yourself. It's all really situational, and once you're in the respawn game and you're fighting back to either take a point on attack or to set up again on defense, it's very difficult to even get them in a spot that's any bit useful, and that's where her issue is. Now, that wouldn't be a problem if the rest of her kit worked freely and those sentries were more of just an added bonus and not a core concept of her kit. So, moving into those aspects, her weapon range on her left click was increased, but really, even with the increased range, she's almost guaranteed to lose that duel, or at the very least, die right after winning that duel, because the weapon does melt things, but beyond doing a bunch of jumping, evasive techniques, it's not a way to reliably win a fight and survive yourself. And especially as this type of character, you don't really want to just be dying and running in. You're not actually a tank, despite our memeing title, which is sort of an in-joke between the Your Overwatch crew, by the way. She can't actually tank. Now, speaking of tanking, moving on to her projected barrier, and this is one of the most interesting abilities we have seen in Overwatch, but I don't know if the value's quite there. What I would like to see out of it, ideally, is for it to be as impactful to the game as a Mei wall, which can stop ultimates, which can completely win team fights if put in the proper spot at the right time. A Mei wall can be devastating, but at the same time has a really high skill cap. Projected barrier, I think, is even more situational than a Mei wall, which is a big issue, because it feels like the proper way to use it, in my opinion, is to be in a death ball yourself, behind a Rhine shield, and then set up an extra barrier to breach into another spot. The barrier's got a lot of HP. It's got 1,000, which is more than a Winston barrier, and half of a Rhine shield, which is really powerful. But because of the speed it goes at and the incredibly predictable nature of it, it feels hard to guarantee value like you can with a Mei wall, which happens instantly, and it's big and massive and takes up a lot of space. With that being said, outside of the solo queue context, where maybe you pop it to win a duel as you stand behind it and zap your opponent, and then you guarantee that fight win, I'm finding it difficult to see the value in the team dynamic. When I first heard about it, I was hoping it could be something that is similar to Defense Matrix from Diva, which is an instant ability that saves a teammate from something. The issue is, Projected Barrier is so slow and so easy to see coming that it's less dexterous than Defense Matrix, and in just about every opportunity that I can think of where Photon Barrier would be good, I just think Defense Matrix is better, which I think is kind of a problem. At the same time though, Photon Barrier could easily be overpowered if it wasn't balanced right. So I would like to see a little bit of tweaking with how it works. Maybe instead of a flat Photon Barrier, it can sort of curve back towards the team and maybe create a bit of a partial shell over the team so you can more easily direct it in the right way and it takes up a bit more three-dimensional space. Whereas now it's like a plane of glass that you could just walk around. Compare that to the Winston bubble, which is big and spherical, or half a sphere, I suppose. And it's hard to stay out of the way. Like, Winston can navigate around it and win footsie battles even against his counters if playing within it. The Photon Barrier doesn't feel as reliable to make plays with as that, and that's kind of where I would like to see it go.
The thing that I'd like to see changed about it is I'd like her to have a little bit more control. Now, obviously, if they give Symmetra too much control, then what's the point of a Rhine shield? But one idea that I had to myself was, when you activate the Photon Barrier, it moves out at a steady speed and in the direction that you activated it. Now, there's two things you could do. One is, I would like to be able to control the rate that it advances. By holding the button down, it would move slower. Letting go, it would move faster. So if you wanted it to very quickly go towards someone and you wanted to push them, you would just press it once. You would tap it, essentially, and you could walk up behind it. But there's another thing that you could do where you press and hold the button and it moves at a slower rate. So you've got this control over how fast it shifts, so you can play footsies with the rate at which it advances. And I think that would be a cool addition. If you weren't going to do that, then I think you would have to maintain some control over the direction of the barrier. So like right now it's you just project it out and then you go off into the world, little shield, and it has its own life and goes to its own college and makes its own mistakes and ends up doing nothing. What I would like to see is you just be able to aim it just a little bit so it doesn't, just head off into a wall or something. I think the more control you give Symmetra in that context, the more outplay ability you give her. And I think that's the design of the shield, is to have outplay ability. And that's what I'd like to see changed. What do you think?
I think those are amazing ideas, really. I mean, think about the difference between the Rhine shield and the Symmetra Photon Barrier. Now, of course, people might be upset at me comparing the two because one's actually a tank and the other one's a support. But for it to have value, the Rhine shield can get sucked into an ultimate that's amazing, say Graviton, and if his shield has health on it, can stop multiple incoming ults. Whereas the Photon Barrier, in very similar scenarios, even in less stressful ones, feels far less guaranteed because of that. So more control definitely would help. Generally speaking, I think that's a good place to start changing her, if anything, because I don't think we really want to see much else change unless they do the small buffs to the sentries. But I like her weapon where it is. Her weapon does feel supportive. Her right click to me seems comparable to Junkrat's damage in a way, where it's this range spam damage that can cleave up an enemy team, and in some ways even better than that because it goes through barriers and goes through and chunks multiple people on its death mission away to graduate from college and all that. So at first I thought maybe I'd like to see it change, but after playing her a lot more, I realize how good it actually is. They could make it more reliable maybe and lower the damage, but I like it where it is actually. It's very challenging to use and very rewarding when you get big hits with it, and it forces her to play at the back line, keeping herself safe, but also getting big bursts of damage sometimes, and a lot of ult charge when she does land those chunky right clicks. But the problem with that is that it's very unreliable in that you can't guarantee what you're shooting at is going to get hit or even die. So because of that, it is quote-unquote trash damage, or I'd call maybe setup damage, a bulk damage dealer, which is okay, and I think good for her character because that's not really her role to guarantee frags. She's not supposed to be doing that. But the issue is, in the game as it's played right now, especially with Ana in the meta, and she's still in the meta, still very strong. Nano Boost isn't as good, but her healing is just so great that she can overcome all sorts of random damage like that to her benefit to charge her ultimate, which is undoubtedly still better than a lot of other ultimates. So that's kind of the issue with me. And that's where I almost wonder, and I want to play the metagame arithmetic and to better see what can come out of this, because potentially against like a really tanky composition, perhaps it might be the case that if you deal more big bursts of splash damage from range against a very tanky composition, a lot of people talk about the Ninjas in Pajamas comp, which does very well for them, playing 3 or 4 tanks all in a ball. Maybe Symmetra can just blast away from range along with other range damage, and it might be the case that you getting your ultimate and setting up to outfrag them may be enough value, whereas in the previous meta with Nano Boost being so good and having speed, 100% of the time that was wrong. Like, you did not want to pick Junkrat into a tanky lineup like that, because you just won't get to the Ana. She'll definitely heal and definitely have more nano and just win the game that way. Perhaps now, with it slightly nerfed, that sort of poke at the choke, spam damage meta might work. I don't know, I'd like to see it tried, especially with the fact that against that really stable, slow-paced composition, her Photon Barrier will see more use as well, because that's another thing that I gotta mention. So many of the characters jump. I don't know if you knew this, but Photon Barrier can only really be used on a horizontal plane, which means if you're playing against an enemy composition, which is Rhine with a Hog and another tank hiding back there, and you're trying to breach into that composition in a poke battle, the Photon Barrier can be good, but it does nothing against Genji and Pharah and things that can just fly above you, because there's no way to really aim it, whereas like Defense Matrix, on the other hand, can be aimed that way.
Even with the new changes to Symmetra, there's a big elephant in the room that we have to discuss, and that's the fact that she's going to have to compete for a support slot on a team. And even with all the changes and an increased viability, I would say, for certain positions, part of the design philosophy of this redesign was to make her more dexterous, make her more applicable for more maps and game modes. And I think when compared to the other support, is she ever going to offer more value than Discord, which can be out all the time and can directly affect your team's focus fire and absolutely melt things and win you the game, essentially? Or can she compete with Ana and Nano and just her healing value? Can she compete with Mercy, with the res and damage and all that kind of stuff? Is she still not in a position to be able to properly dispute that? Because if you're taking Symmetra, then you might be going single healer. Now, I'm not saying that you can't play that way and win. I think you can. But I think there are definitely environments at which you do definitely want another support. And her offering no healing whatsoever outside of an ultimate that isn't that great in my estimation, I don't think is where a support character should be.
I believe we have covered this in the past before, and Jeff Kaplan himself, I believe, even said that they'd consider moving her out of the support category, and I think that's actually really important, to be honest, because there's so many misconceptions about these categories, and I've spent length talking about this. It annoys a lot of people sometimes when we come up with the Roadhog's not a tank, let's not go down that road again, but Symmetra really should be closer to a builder like Torb, and thought of in the lineup as such, in my opinion. She's a damage dealer at the end of the day, because if you build your team around expecting her to have supportive capabilities, you're going to be in just as much of a problem as you would if you expected your Roadhog to do the majority of your tanking. And in fact, Symmetra has more tanking capabilities than even a Roadhog. So she does bulk damage from range, she has zoning, map potential with the sentries, she has this interesting ultimate, but really, she's got to fit into a Death Ball style comp that can protect her and output spam damage from afar and control map with her sentries. That's where I think she fits the best, in a similar way that a Torb would. Maybe you fit them both on the same team. But really, she shouldn't be in the support category as far as I'm concerned, because it's misleading to players who think they're somewhat equivalent and they're really not to the playstyle of how Overwatch has to be played if you want to win, especially against teams that are challenging you. Well, only time will tell. We'll have to see the evidence as it goes through and people testing her out more and more. Interested to know what your guys' thoughts are in the comment section below. As we play her more, we'll make more videos on the subject. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. It really does help us out. Be sure to subscribe for more. We upload each and every day. And check out our Twitch page where we live stream each and every day. And if you'd like to know when we're going live, check out our Twitter for stream announcements, updates, and other cool clips. That's been it for us from Your Overwatch. We'll see you guys next time.